So the chair will bring to order the Monday, May 1st, 2017 Single Family Design Board to order. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address the board on any item not on today's agenda? Seeing no one come forward, the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for approval of the SFDB meeting of April 17th. Do I have a motion for approval? Do I have a second?
I'll second. Oh,
Okay.
good, my microphone.
Let's go through it. The first one is item number 1, 2001 Stanwood Drive. Any comments, questions? Next item is 2439 Santa Barbara Street. I think, was that it? 2 items? That was it?
No.
Oh, I see. Something got... Oh, we looked at... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Because there's an item A. We actually had our landscape folks look at 550 Owen Road. That was the landscape thing. And then we looked at item number 3, 1625 Overlook.
Didn't we put off one? 2430?
I think it was 2439 was put
You
off.
weren't here last.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
that was
And we
postponed.
put in Owen Road as well.
Let's see, and then we're down to 3360 Braemar Drive. Comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
One abstention.
One abstention. Okay, so carried. Let's go to the consent calendar for April 24th.
The the minutes for the April 24th consent meeting are as follows. Item A, 550 Owen Road, was continued indefinitely due to the applicant's absence. Item B, 929 Alston Road, received final approval as submitted. Item C, 237 San Clemente, received final approval as submitted. Item D, 1110 Chino Street, was continued indefinitely due to the applicant's absence. Item E, 33 Los Alturas Circle, was continued 1 week for the applicant to restudy the entry overhead. Landscape plans are ready for project design approval. Item F, 626 Sunrise Vista Way, received project design approval and final approval as submitted with the following comments: that the NPO findings had been met, and the board had positive comments regarding the project's consistency and appearance with no negative visual impacts, neighborhood compatibility, as care has been taken to screen the pool equipment from public view, quality of architecture and materials to enhance the home in compliance with good neighbor guidelines to ensure the pool equipment noise does not impact neighbors. Item G, 1214 High Ridge Lane, received project design approval and final approval as submitted with comments. The NPO findings were made. And item H, 226 Oliver Road, received project design approval and final approval as submitted with the neighborhood preservation ordinance findings.
Okay. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Any discussions, questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Let's go to the consent calendar for this morning, May 1st, 2017. Katie?
The minutes for the May 1st consent agenda are as follows. Item A, 2439 Santa Barbara Street. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry, 430 Conejo Road, received project design approval and final approval with conditions that the board made the neighborhood preservation ordinance findings. The applicant was to add 45-degree brackets on the deck posts, and the metal material for the deck is appropriate and must be painted to look like wood. Item B, 1306 Dover Hill Road, received project design approval and final approval with the findings that the neighborhood preservation ordinance criteria have been met. Item C, 1646 Franceschi Road, received project design approval and final approval as submitted with the NPO findings. Item D, 936 Alita Lane, received project design approval and final approval with the findings that the neighborhood preservation ordinance criteria have been met. Item E, 3102 Seacliff, continued 1 week to consent due to the applicant's absence. Item F, 550 Owen Road, received approval of review after final changes. And item G, 33 Los Alturas Circle, was continued to today's full board meeting for review.
Okay. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Our second?
Before we take a call on the motion, I have a question on item G. I'm assuming when that comes that Katie, you or Brian, or who else reviewed this morning?
Me and
So you guys will explain why you brought it forward? Okay. All right. Anything else? All in favor signify by saying aye.
I.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Okay. Let's go to announcements. Katie.
I don't have any announcements at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. I do have a question, Katie. Denise sent us a memo about a couple of dates that she needs to not be here. And one of them is the consent, so do we have somebody be able to step in?
Yes, Lisa's going to be covering for
Do-
Denise's
okay.
meetings.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes we make decisions and they're very quick, and then we go home and we start thinking a little bit more and we wonder. So my question is, if we vote in a direction, can we then, if it comes back, do we have the option to vote in a different way?
I think you do, but I think it behooves you, if you're going to change your vote, to explain why you did it and what your rationale is. If it's a vote just on comments, it's always just helpful to share with us why you're changing your mind. If it's a motion where we're giving project design approval, because that's an appealable decision. The challenge with that is that typically we don't meet before that 10-day appeal period is up. So in essence, your comments in theory aren't relevant, and it makes it very difficult if someone's appealing for you to come 2 weeks later to say, oh, I've changed my mind. But
Okay.
that's under project design. Now, in theory, you could wait till the project comes back for final approval and express your reservation at that point. But I think it's going to be imperative on you, or whoever wants to do that, imperative that you have a rational, logical reason why you've changed your position at the time of final approval. Because in theory, your issue may have been a design issue of some substance, and when we're reviewing it for project design approval, that kind of sets in motion the general direction for the whole project. And if you come back at final approval and say, look, I'm totally against this whole addition or whatever, that really puts the applicant in a very difficult position. But I think you are allowed to certainly express your opinions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Did we already take a vote?
Well, I have-
we're at announcements. Okay.
I have one more. I apologize, I didn't make the
Okay.
site visit today. I had a deadline that I had to
No problem.
fulfill, so,
You're working on a volunteer board. You
so,
have to do what you have to do. Let's see. The only other question I had, did you all get a chance to, we got two emails from staff. One was on the, I think one email on the budget and the city administrator's proposed budget and comments and so forth and so on. I looked at it. I couldn't figure out if it has any effect on what we do or not. Katie, any hint?
I'm not familiar if there's, or I'm not aware if there's any changes to impact this board. I can check with Jaime and get back to you.
It's hard to, it was a very general, we're cutting here and we're adding there, whatever. I couldn't figure out what it was. The other thing that I did receive from our City Council, what do we call it, liaison, Jason Dominguez. He did send me a copy of a memorandum that went to the mayor and council from the Community Development Director and Renee Brook, our senior city planner. And it basically outlines the workload for the next couple of years. And you all recall that we sent a letter to staff or to council, requesting that they move as quickly as they could on a secondary or accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And so just to let you know, that is on their workload for 2016, 2017, because I think the year starts in July 1.
Yes.
So it's on the workload for this year and into, which indicates there will be some work theoretically into 2017.
Wow.
So it's underway. That's all we know. But it is on their workload. Okay. Anything else? Subcommittee? Anything else? Questions? Okay.
No, so we just have that one continued item from the full board.
Okay. So that's this 33. Where is it?
Yes. 33 Los Alturas.
So who's here for that? Paul, you want to come up? All right, welcome. If you want to turn one of those mics on, both of those mics. Okay, before you start, I think it's probably
Consent.
pertinent if we hear from the two of you
No, it's
first
somewhere.
why you're bumping it up.
Yeah.
Oh, one of these I just
So
saw.
Paul's here with his client and owner, and what came up before us was the design of this house. This is the current design. And my comment was on this current porch configuration, and I felt that it was not really an appropriate style design, and he had an option which I really liked. Where's the one you...
Yep, those other
When he-
options are in this set.
Yeah, and the one I preferred that I thought was a little better was the flat. I thought that kind of conflicted, and I thought the flat was better, but the designer and the owner is passionate that they have this kind of style with this configuration. So
Okay.
that's an issue for, and they wanted the full board's input.
Okay. Denise, did you have
I
any other
agree
comments?
with Brian about this,
Okay.
that the flat configuration that's cantilevered without the posts in the front was more desirable.
Okay. Okay. So that's why you brought it back. Okay. So if you could kind of share with us where you're headed.
Brian had basically said, did you consider other options? And said during the design process we did, and then we went back and we revisited it, and we did change and tweak the look. And this is the look that the client and I have went back a couple times, and that's what we're happy with, and that's what we want to go with. Since then, we're looking at it. What's interesting about the existing house is that there are some very strong forms, but the front entry is very nondescript. And so that's where we're trying to create an entrance that says, hello, this is where the front door is, come take a look at us. So we don't have a problem having an angle here, because this angle here related to the angle that was happening over this master bedroom. But you can tell by the landscaping, it's not really prominent or evident. But approaching the house, you'll be able to see this. So to me, it's an architectural element. This is very quiet and almost lacks any punch. More punch than what's currently here, because this is completely understated. In reviewing it, going up to the house after we met with Brian, they are leaning towards this way only because they're being forced to or required to. If we were to go with a solution like this, we will change the overhang that we currently have. This is a pergola that we have that'll have a shade cloth on top. And the reason right now there are these existing little eyebrow roofs, part of the architecture, because it gets beaten by the sun, both on the south and on the west. And so I actually have a horizontal element because these come down and block the head of the window. So when you're looking out the window, you see the underside of the roof. So in designing this whole thing, one of the principles was coming out was how to create a shade structure for these windows that didn't block the view, but shaded the windows, and then have something completely different for the front entry. So that was kind of the design theme, and then having the angle of the roof was a great quote of the other architecture that's on the building.
Could you show us the flat elevations, please?
Yes. Oops. Sorry about that. I thought it was empty.
It was.
I have since put these oops, once again, in 2D form in the computer, but these are basically flat 3Ds of the
So
computer
where are
model.
we?
This is where we are, and this was the older version where Brian commented on this. Can you please go back and revisit it? One of the principles, we have a major beam that we're inserting into this main living room, and so for me, it was trying to have a continuation of this beam from the entry all the way through to the living room. That's how this initially started. When Brian made his comment, the design review that we went through, we ended up removing that beam and taking the columns all the way up. The other interesting thing that's happening is this corner right here, we have some horizontal siding that's above the door and it turns the corner slightly. It relates to the horizontal siding that we have at the back of the building. Now at the back of the building, we do have these lower 24-inch metal overhangs, and this is probably what we would quote and put over these two windows. If we were to make this a cantilevered roof element, then I would take this design theme and put that over here, and I would pull these windows apart, because I intentionally forced them together to have one element. Because right now, I think there's two windows that are like this.
Okay. All right, questions of the board?
So where we are right now, what you're proposing, what we're asking you to do is to flatten this. Give us that. So we're gonna end up a flatting thing and just cantilever it out with no posts. And you're gonna remove these posts over here?
If we go with this
This.
option, then we will remove these posts and we'll change the detailing of this to match an overhang that we have at various parts in the building.
It's not our preference, but it's
Yeah.
the backup, because we have to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
This is more. No, hold on.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes,
I
please.
do. Will you have an intense landscape program to go with this?
Yes, we have a complete redo of the landscaping. This is high fire, so we're not allowed to put anything on the shade structure, so it's not a pergola per se. And to have vines growing up and over these columns and all that kind of stuff isn't an option for us.
And Denise, you've already looked at the landscape plan?
Yes.
Paul, are you proposing a glass garage door?
It will have opaque panels, but yes, it will be that style. So it won't be translucent.
Okay, another question. So these are new windows,
Yes, they are.
and they're going up, is it 7 feet or 6'8"?
I'm picking them
Or
up to 7 feet. Right now, they're 6'8".
right now, they're 6'8", so that line right there is roughly 7 feet.
Correct?
Okay.
I have the existing elevations if you want to see drawn.
All right.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
the window structure changes from the original house because they were originally 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And we're making.
Understand. Okay, I'm gonna take some effort here, but just to get this to move along. I think that I could live with this, but it needs to be, and drop these little, whatever they are at the bottom.
Keep the wood 8 inches off the concrete, off the dirt.
Just let them float up, just let them float, you know, there's a bracket you can buy to get these to just float up so they don't get the dry rot. And I would extend that out, and I'm trying to get a proportion of 2/3, 1/3. So get this to be 2/3 of this angle here. Let that go up, and then take these guys and really get them out here and use the same language. Oops. Okay, and then you get a shadow line down there. Then I think, and if you possibly could, I don't know all the details, is get that glass to go up here. You've got glass cutting the edge of that, so let that be glass, let this be glass, let that all be glass, and really buy into the statement you're trying to make here. That allows you to get a shadow here and that shadow here. Then I think it kind of makes sense, because it's a proportional thing between that and that. And let this beam, don't let that beam, the problem with this beam is that if you let it, then you have to deal with dry rot. So let this eave come like that, let the beam come here, and then take this column so it's sitting back like
The
here.
beam's kind of hidden more.
Yeah, it comes back under, then you don't have to worry about the maintenance, because if you bring it out like that, then I always, if I do that,
All over the top.
then I put a piece of copper over the top of that, because otherwise it just gets dry rotted instantaneously. So you either do it that way or do it like that, and then put a copper flashing unit over the whole, have them fabricate a piece of copper over the whole top. That saves you forever. If not, get it tucked back in, but let this thing do that.
Pretty wild. That's
Okay.
quite a statement.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, do it.
Yeah.
Don't be,
Well, but Brian's concern was that these two were in conflict with
Yeah,
each
I thought
other.
they
but I think if
don't
they,
have a
if,
problem.
I think, yes, I agree with you, Brian, they did, they were in conflict, but I think if you relate it to the proportion of this length to that length, then it kind of works.
Okay.
In my view.
Yeah, I see that.
And let this, if you're gonna be bold, then let this do it. And if the purpose of getting this to do it is to protect this south-facing from that intense sun, then you've done it.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty.
What do you think of that?
All right. Any other comments?
Yeah, I want to talk about the opaque garage door, where it faces and how much glass and all of that.
It's a standard garage door, so it's 16 feet wide, faces a cul-de-sac. So that, I think it's got an angled view going to the site.
So the opaque material is what?
It'll be glass, but it's that milky white glass. It's not going to allow, it's not clear. Here's the garage door for this.
We haven't finalized that.
Okay, well, you're gonna get it finalized one way or the other right now.
Yep.
Brian, what did you guys make comments on?
We made no comments on the garage door.
So did you-
That kind of slipped through the cracks, so
Okay, so that's up for
comments.
comments. So, Denise?
Here's the garage door, here's the cul-de-sac, so it's not a garage that faces the cul-de-sac. I do understand the concern about having clear windows, because when you turn them on, they look like a fluorescent light fixture, so that is not what we're proposing. When I say it's opaque, it's going to, when the garage door goes down, it's like, oh wow, look at that contemporary house, isn't that cool? But it's not, when they turn the lights on at 9 o'clock at night and forget to turn them off, it's not gonna glow like a kitchen ceiling.
I've been going around and since Bernie she keeps bringing it up about these opaque garage or lit garage doors. I happen to just look at them constantly as I drive around town. I'm around town a lot, and they don't put out any kind of torch. They look like just a garage door that has some light behind them. If the light is allowed to shine through, yes, it lights up the whole area. But garage doors that are just opaque lights do not brighten up the neighborhood.
Okay.
So I'll just
I'm-
address that, because I know there are a lot more of them around town, and they're a lot easier to spot while you're on Shoreline, while you're on Balboa, there's one. I mean, they're coming up all over. So I think in terms of neighborhood preservation that we have to be careful, because they're very modern. They do change the character of the feeling of a neighborhood, and maybe they're okay in some neighborhoods and some designs, but I think we should be cautious.
May I comment on that? Russell Tourist has a lot of really modern homes on it. So I think in this instance, it's appropriate, especially since, honestly, we've seen them, but have you ever seen them really glaring light out of them, ever? They really don't do that, I agree with
Yeah, no,
Joe.
that's not my argument. My argument's more about, the character and the neighborhood preservation
Yeah,
stuff.
well, that's why I was mentioning that Las Alturas is pretty, it's got a lot of really modern homes on it. So I think in this particular case.
In this house, I actually
and
think
with this house,
it would fit.
works.
Yeah.
And we just did something with that.
This is where we started, and Brian didn't like that, so which is why we exercised the other direction.
we're
But
going
now
back.
we'll go back and make it a little
Well,
bit
see,
longer.
I felt that this was complicated and that they were fighting each other. So
But we
that
resolved
was,
some.
that was my opinion.
Other comments?
I think the house is a modern enough house, and it's in an area that could have a garage door like this.
Okay. I will just point out, given the landscape plan, and the position of the door, and then having been on the street, as you recall, we have reviewed extensively a house here. We have reviewed extensive another house that Paul did down on this side. We've had this whole community come out and be at this meeting, so we've looked at this neighborhood, or this particular street extensively. And I think in this particular case, I agree with my colleagues, it will have less of an impact versus the ones that we see over on the Mesa where the garage doors are right facing the street, and they do glow. Not all of them glow, but they do glow. So, but I think in this case, I probably could live with the fact that it's facing almost nothing and given the end of the street here. So I'm less concerned in this particular case than I usually am about garage doors. Okay, other comments? Okay, if not, then I think what we required to have is some kind of motion. And Katie, is this a final approval? What's the process?
It's eligible for project design approval.
Project design approval. Okay, so not final, but project design approval. Okay.
That's correct.
So if we're so inclined, we can give it project design approval with comments
So
or direction or whatever.
That's the board's pleasure, is that?
And then if for some reason we decide to go with another option, we'll just go back to consent with option number 4.
Okay. Love seeing you guys.
We haven't
Okay, so the chair is looking for a motion.
Make a motion.
Yes.
The board would like to give this project design approval to return to the full board in what? Indefinitely?
Can we go back to consent? This is a one-story building where
Oh,
we're
I'm
here
sorry.
because we're more than 4,000 square feet, but we're only doing a 1,000 square foot addition to
I'd
the existing.
recommend consent.
Huh? Consent?
Yeah.
Okay. To return to consent
For
In 2
final
weeks?
approval, correct?
Final
for
approval.
final in 2 weeks.
No,
No, indefinite.
Indefinite.
Definitely,
Final drawings take a while to do.
And the board finds the architecture to be appropriate for the neighborhood, and with the comments that the roof, the entry eave be configured in a way similar to what the suggestions made by Mr. Sweeney. And that we approve of the glass opaque garage door.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Is there a second to that
I'll
motion?
second.
Is there any further discussion to the
Yes,
motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
are the color going to be matching the existing? and-
The colors, if it goes back to consent, will be handled at
Yeah.
consent.
We've got color boards and stuff, but the 3D models represent pretty close to what you want to, what we're planning on doing. If you want to see them, I can pull them out. But that can be done at consent.
I guess it's okay.
Okay. All right. Any other comments to the motion? Not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions, so carried. Okay. Okay, thank you
You want this-
for bringing that
You might want to
forward.
frame it.
And then I'm going to frame it. I'll expect to see the bill in the mail tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So to, now we're back to 2439 Santa Barbara Street. Oh, and this is the project, I'm sorry, I forgot. This is one I need to step down on because it's too close to my house. So Mr. Miller, you'll need to.
Hi there.
Do you have new sets?
I just, no, I don't.
You have the, so this is a new project, right?
Via.
You have the minutes.
I'll grab that in just a moment.
Okay. Denise, you want to read the minutes? These are the minutes.
Okay, you were last here on the 23rd of January, is that correct, or?
That sounds right. Yep.
Sounds about right. Okay, motion, project design approval with the finding that the neighborhood preservation ordinance criteria have been met. Okay, and continued indefinitely to consent review with the board's positive comments regarding the addition of the front porch that is consistent with the appearance and scenic character of the city, has neighborhood compatibility, quality of architecture and materials, and follows a good neighbor guideline. So this is a review after
March
finding.
6th was the last.
March 6th, so that is not the correct thing. You received final approval as submitted on the 6th, so that there were no other comments.
So
this is a review after final.
So could you like to introduce yourselves and tell us what changed?
Yeah, I'm Chris Cottrell, the architect.
And I'm Chris Jacobs. I'm a real estate attorney, and I'm representing the owners,
Okay.
Ray and Susanna Karam.
And the review after final is for the roof material.
Okay.
We are proposing a standing seam roof for this house.
Okay.
And what we've done is put together a little exhibit
Oh.
here. This is an aerial of the neighborhood. This is this is 2439 right here. And each of these are correlated to these. So this is the neighbor. They've got an approved project here, a very modern house, a two doors down. And the neighboring house, a very similar form to the house in question, 2439. And then these three are across the street. Again, this is very similar to the house in question, and the two across are a Spanish tile roof. So a very eclectic mix of architecture right there. Again, this is us right here. I'm going to hand it
So
over to
let me
Chris.
give you a little bit of the background story. This house right here at 2525, which is presently being occupied and is owned by the Karams, the same people who own this one and are making this application today. This was a Brett Edinger project that is approved. And when this house next door at 2539 came available, the Karams said, you know what, it would be great if we could purchase that home so that we could live in that home while we were overseeing the construction of our other home at 2525 Santa Barbara. So they did complete that purchase, and they're in the process of remodeling 2439 so that they can move in and then begin 2525. As they were looking at all of the materials and that are available out there and what their particular style is, they said, you know what, we'd really rather go with a standing seam metal roof on this house rather than fiberglass shingle, CertainTeed Presidential or whatever else was approved. They think it fits well with the form of the house. It's obviously very similar to the other houses in the neighborhood. It's a full hip roof form. Nothing has changed, but they like the aesthetics of the standing seams coming up and meeting on the hips and at the ridges. They also are very interested in PV, so the photovoltaic panels will go on the south side of the house. And they're particularly well adapted to standing seam metal roofs with little brackets that slip right over the standing seams.
No boot, no penetration. Just holding on to the seams.
Can you explain a little bit more what those are?
Yeah, so this is this is not the color we're proposing, but this is a typical standing seam roof. And traditionally, solar panels are mounted on a boot that goes right through your roof material, bolts into the
I see.
sheathing. This bolts right to this seam,
Right.
so there's no waterproofing issue at all.
No penetration at all.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
that's one of the drivers, together with the aesthetics. It's an environmentally superior product to fiberglass shingle. It's obviously fire safe, and it's the color that we've selected is I think it's called antique copper, but it's
Weathered.
really, to match the anodized bronze windows that are used in this house. In the house, the profile of the windows is actually very thick. They're Schuco, sort of a German product, and so gutters are the same. It's a house that's evolved over time, built in the 60s, of course had a shake roof initially, and when the project started, it had a very heavy concrete tile roof, Monier tile roof, and that's been stripped off. The framing really wasn't strong enough to handle that roof, and so that's what we're proposing, is to go to a 24 gauge steel baked enamel finish roof.
Okay, is that your presentation?
At least for now.
All right. So is there any public comment or letters?
No mailed in or written public comment.
Okay, thank you. So I'll bring it to the board. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Can you show us what was approved the last go-round?
Yeah, it was a presidential asphalt shingle. It was the,
Can we get a visual
yeah.
on that?
Thank you.
And this is the rendered view
Typical.
Oh, I see.
with the standing seam. Sorry, we should have put that up.
For the public to see.
Can you tell us how many of those solar things there are and what they look like?
The solar panels are on the south side of the building, non-facing the street, so they can't really be seen. They will essentially cover the entire south-facing roof plane,
Which is on the back of the house.
which is on the back of the house. So this entire plane will be filled with those.
So are there any neighbors on that other side that look into it or look at it?
No, it's a pretty well isolated, we don't have a copy of the assessor's parcel map, but the parcels in this area are all relatively large.
I'm familiar with,
This is, so they have extra long, deep parcels on the outside.
So they're,
That's what we're saying right there.
okay.
Yeah, and the two adjacent houses in Bernstein are just.
These are these
exactly
two
parallel.
houses?
Yep.
yeah.
This is proposed. Yeah.
This is proposed, that's what they're.
Proposed, this is subject, and this is the
Okay.
joiner. The roof forms on these houses are all very similar.
Yeah.
They're all full hip,
Yeah.
and they've transitioned. This one is still wood shake, still, it needs to be replaced. This one was transitioned to a simulated, I don't know whether it's S-tile, but it's a Spanish tile appearing roof.
So are there other houses in Santa Barbara that are using this technology?
The technology, the standing seam roof, is a technology that's used frequently in Mission Canyon.
No, I know about the standing seam. I'm asking about the solar. Hanging the things that are going to be all over the back of it.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Yeah,
Right.
that's standard. That is standard. That's one of the chief advantages. You don't have to have a frame that's, say, a steel frame that has penetrations through the roofing membrane.
Yeah, there's a lot of solar paneled houses here in Santa Barbara.
Well,
And the criteria usually is that they're not seen from the street.
and that's a city requirement, because I think the state of California says we really can't stop you from putting solar panels on, so.
It's state law that you
Yeah.
can't interfere with somebody, but most people are coming to you and saying, we're putting in solar panels,
Right.
and they show them on their plans. They don't want to have a fight.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So any more questions? I don't have any questions, so I'll go to comments. Any comments?
Well, I'll start. I think that it does lend itself well to affixing solar panels to it. in that particular neighborhood, I don't think there's too many standing seam metal roofs, so that's the only thing that's really throwing me. That's an Upper East neighborhood that's fairly traditional, and I think the color that you chose is really good. I think it may disappear, but I'm a little disappointed in the change of materials just because of the fact that, you know, it is going to really throw a new thing into that neighborhood. I'm on the fence about it.
Lisa?
I'll weigh in. I walked all around the area, and there really aren't standing seam metal roofs. And while it does, if it was not in this neighborhood, I might feel more supportive of it. But if we're trying to retain the fabric of the neighborhood, I don't think I can support it. And presidential isn't that romantic, but I think it's attractive in relation to the rest of the neighborhood. So
I don't think we have a fabric of a neighborhood in the Upper East Side that's changing. It's constantly changing. We're constantly getting different houses, even the houses that you're photographed here on both sides of the road.
Yeah, they're
and
totally
both sides are completely different. You know, years ago, 60, 70, 80, 90 years ago, 80 years ago, houses they all built the same. They're not anymore. We're getting manufactured houses up there that nobody liked, and all of a sudden it really fits in. We got corners of Isley and Garden Street that are 70 and 80-year-old houses that are getting remodeled. Some of them are changed. Some are spending a lot of money and bringing them back exactly to what they were when they were built. But all the houses in the Upper East Side, and I know it for a fact because I've lived and I own houses in the Upper East Side, and they're changing. And I'm going to change my houses, and I don't see anything. I mean, I think I for one on this board doesn't think that because standing seam houses are not in a specific area that we can't put them there. It's all the architecture is changing in the city. Everybody's bringing. We're going to look at some projects today that people with a lot of money are changing, and there's nothing we can do about it. And
let's just focus on this house.
Okay. I for one, I know a lot of houses in the Upper East Side, condos that are standing seam, and I agree with it. I will go along with it. I support standing seam.
Well, you know, I kind of follow up with Joe because if I look at these houses, every one of them is different.
Yeah.
And so there's the fabric. I'm shocked we approved this one, but if we approved it, it changes the fabric of the neighborhood in such that it's a whole different vernacular to that, which is a total different vernacular to that. So it kind of fits because every one of them are different. They're all very different.
And the houses, I mean, I've worked on some of the houses just down the street here as an architect, and they're two-story. They're two-story. I think three of these are two-story, and they got flat concrete tiles on them now.
Yeah.
To me, it's architecture and building technology evolves.
Right.
So you went from wood shake, and then you go to fiberglass or asphalt shingle.
Yes.
What is there that's so great about fiberglass or asphalt shingle that you want to perpetuate that? Why wouldn't you go to a superior material? It's more environmentally sound, looks better, and lasts longer.
I agree with you.
And it just
make aesthetic decisions.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah. Well, the other comment I would like to make is this. With regards to the solar panel, if we do ask them to go back to the asphalt shingles, I feel uncomfortable having them penetrate it. So there's an argument supporting that. So I guess I think we all have. I could support this. I guess I could support it. I think it's actually consistent with the neighborhood, not because I like it, but the fact that every house is different. So it's not. It adds. It's part of the character that neighborhood to being different as opposed to being similar, because they're not. So I guess that's my argument for that. So anyway, would anyone care to make a motion or have any more comments?
Mr. Chair, could I add one comment?
Sure.
One of my mentors at the University of Oregon, Howard Davis, he was studied under Christopher Alexander, and his big philosophy on neighborhood compatibility was if you can pull 30% of the character of the houses around you, that means mass, material, color. If you can draw in 30% of that fabric, then it fits.
Okay.
And what we're proposing here, we're 95%. The mass is
Yeah.
the same.
Right.
The materials, that's what's different. It's one minor change, but everything else, the shape is still a hip roof. Everything else fits. So that's why I think this argument works.
Well, with all due respect to your professor, being an architect and everything, I'm sure he has a good point of view. And I understand both sides of this argument. I'm undecided. However, Santa Barbara is so unique and so special and so different than just about any other beach city that you can think of. And the reason why is because we're so careful about neighborhood compatibility. And 30%, I don't think really holds up here.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we approve the change of the roof from asphalt to standing seam with the colors that you have presented, and with the idea that, yes, it fits in the neighborhood because the neighborhood is changing. It has changed. None of the houses in the neighborhood are maybe one is wood shingles now, and none of the houses are the same, and it is compatible with solar energy on the roof.
Okay.
That's my motion.
Thank you. Someone like to second that? No, here we go again.
I guess I'll second it.
Okay, great. All right, we got a second. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? So 3 have it and 2 opposed. The measure passes, right?
No, I didn't.
One abstention? You abstain?
No, I said yes.
You said yes? Okay.
3 against 2.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank you.
We need,
Yes. If I can just keep this.
Yep.
Not happy at all. All right. These are my notes. So we're at 3360 Braemar Drive. This is here for comments only. Project was last reviewed on April 17, 2017, and requires coastal review and staff hearing officer review for zoning modification request. Mr. Miller, do we have some comments from our last meeting? Not yet. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Jim Davis, architect.
Akiko Wade Davis, architect.
Welcome. And we'll start as soon as we get whatever our comments were from last meeting. Nowhere to be found? Is that right there? Nope.
no.
Okay, while she's looking, we'll come back to that. So if you could share with us what you've done, please.
Okay, so here's just the existing site plan again. There are some changed statistics. There's about a 50 square foot increase in what we're proposing from previous, and that's just because of addressing the comments where we were playing around. We were playing around with the second floor where that landed. So here again is the proposed site plan. The darker areas are the first floor additions. The crosshatch area is the second floor addition, and then here is the second floor deck. There was an interior change. We actually relocated where the stair was. Originally it was up here, so we basically flipped this on the floor plan. The other minor interior changes, I won't go over those. Second floor has also changed. We actually pulled that back in a little bit, and what that did is it actually shifted all of this mass closer to the intermediate mass. So now what you're looking at is, this used to be over here more, and there was a gap in this portion, so we've actually made things a little bit cleaner. I know that was one of the main concerns. The other item that we've made here, which is a comment from the board, was regarding the breakups. We've made that more consistent throughout. We looked at a couple different options for the roofs in terms of the hip versus the gables, and we felt like it just became too modern when we did a flat roof on the lower floor and kept the gable on the top floor. But these are actually being reframed at a lower pitch again. And the intention for these is actually to make this feel as if it is, just a lower, we're trying to make this feel more important. So that's why we were lowering these pitches.
And also for the appearance of these lower pitches to have that flat look when you're standing at the house, and for this to be the more prominent roof element, but still have the softening effect of the overhangs and the more traditional effect of the overhangs as well.
There was a concern also with a lantern effect for the south elevation. So this is a view of what you would see. This is some of the existing screening on site, and the house is back over here, which the second floor would come up a little bit. But you can see that you aren't going to see a huge amount of this structure. They really don't want to do a whole lot with that lower portion of the lot. They want to keep it pretty natural. They will clean things up and actually increase the screening. As you can see along this here, they've got 2 dead trees that they want to actually replace and make it so you can't see the house even more so. We also have provided some renderings too, which was a request of the board. So again, similar to this view, this is actually getting rid of some of the screening too, so you can actually see the house too, because otherwise the rendering would just be this.
Mr. Chair, I do have minutes, by the way. I don't know
Okay,
if you
let's
want
come back to that. Let him
Okay, great.
finish, and then we'll come back to that.
So there's the first view, and again, this is similar to the view here. Then from the center of the lot, this is again the same views. And then as you come up the driveway, this is the view that you would see. And then at the motor court itself, here's again the view. This is actually shifting over closer to the center of the lot and actually a little bit further to the east. That would be the view that you would see. And here's a bird's eye view. And then I also have just a couple of close-up shots. And then the entryway. And then from the second floor deck. And then here, there's 2 also of the rear of the house too, which I don't know if is of much concern, but. Okay. Anything you want to add?
There was comments last time regarding some of the windows facing the street. One being, in this area here, we did reduce the amount of glass here. This was wall-to-wall glass, and this as well, so we did bring it in, but we're trying to be sensitive to that being the main viewpoint from the main space of the house, and also trying to capture that ocean view that they do have. There was comment also on this elevation here where we had smaller windows. What we've decided to do is actually keep the same size windows that they've got currently, and handle privacy from the road with hedge screening along the property line. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Brian, if you could read our comments, please.
Yeah. Number 1, provide more development and renderings of the elevations, which you did. Number 2, study the horizontal and vertical elements of the windows in relation to the overall old-style house. Number 3, study the roof configurations of the second story in relation to the first story with the hips and gable elements. Number 4, the board recommended not using glass or opaque materials for the garage door. Number 5, reconsider and provide further driveway and fence details. Action taken by Miller, seconded by Motisha. Motion was carried.
Okay, thank you. So do we have, before we go to questions of the board, is there anyone in the audience wishing to address this project? Katie, did we get any written comment?
No, we did not, Mr. Chair, but I did want to clarify. You had asked me last week what your purview was on the landscaping and the fencing around the accessory dwelling unit.
Yes.
I talked to Hyman. He said that would still be under your purview to comment on. Just
Right up to the wall?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We wanted that clarification. Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no other public comment, the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. Who has questions?
I do. Did
Yes.
you change the garage door?
We did. It's now solid, so it's wood paneling to match the wood paneling of the house.
Thank you.
What is the material of the roof?
The roof would be a metal standing seam.
Okay.
Katie, this is going to be a question back to you, just an extension of the first question. So now we've got some clarification for staff in terms of landscaping up to the edge of the secondary dwelling unit. Is this deck here?
There's an existing wood deck there that we're actually proposing to have changed in configuration.
So is it getting bigger than what's there now?
It is getting slightly bigger.
Okay, you don't need to explain it. So then that is the question.
The deck would not be within your purview.
So the deck is not within our purview, so the
No.
deck can be as big as it wants to be. We can't say a word about it. Okay.
Well, there may be zoning requirements,
Yeah,
but yeah.
but essentially,
Yeah,
as a
no.
review board, given the state law, we're not allowed to say anything about that.
That's correct.
But we can go right up to the edge of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question is,
Fred,
yes.
I'm sorry, can you just go over that one more time? That sounded really
yeah.
important.
Well, the new state law that went into effect January 1st
Yeah.
basically says that accessory dwelling units, or
Right.
secondary dwellings as we call them in our current zoning code.
Yeah.
State law, it's accessory dwelling unit, does not allow for any
Comment.
any discretionary review whatsoever.
Okay.
So part of my question last time was, given where this was in relationship to this house and the landscaping, what purview does this board have? And the answer came back from staff that we can review everything up to
The wall.
the wall.
Got it.
And now with the further clarification, we can review everything up to the deck. Now, another question. Having looked at this neighborhood, there is not public transportation nearby that I recall, so under the state law, you're required to have one off-street parking space. So Katie,
We're not supposed to be reviewing that anyway.
we can't review that parking space.
No.
We can go up to the edge of it, but we can't review it.
Anything really to do with the accessory building is not
We can look at everything around it, but we can't look at any of
That's
this stuff.
correct.
Okay. So I just want
Nothing to
make
do
sure
with the
we're-
accessory building is under our purview.
Right, so we can't say we don't like the parking place
That's
there.
correct.
Because that's not our purview.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, are there other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So one of our comments last time was to study the horizontal and vertical glass or window and all that, and it still seems, well, maybe we can talk about that.
Okay, so that's in a
now.
comment, but,
Okay.
yeah, question, do we have other questions?
My question is, did you reduce, I guess you just talked about that, about the top windows you reduced, is that the only thing?
We did modify some of the other windows just slightly, but that was the biggest change that we made, was reducing the glass on that south elevation.
Okay, and then, just to clarify, because one of the comments we had was reconsider and provide further driveway and fence details. You just indicated that your client isn't intending to do a lot of further improvement other than what's on the house. Could you clarify in terms of landscaping, driveway, fence, et cetera?
Yes, so they are going to leave this natural for where it is right now. There's a couple of existing trees that are dead right now, so they will replace those just to maintain the screening that was provided by those before they did die. The driveway here, they are going to keep that and repair what is there right now because it's in it's a long driveway, and it's an expensive undertaking to replace that.
Okay. What about the fence?
The fence is actually, this fence along here, they're planning to keep that right now. It's not in a horrible condition, and if it is leaning, they will repair it, but they'll repair it as necessary.
All right, so question again to Katie. Do we have the purview to require additional landscaping, changes to the fence, changes to the driveway as a part of this approval? Can we ask for that?
If it's part of the scope of work and you think it's relevant to the main residence, then yes.
So we could require changes that they're not offering right now,
If it's in the scope of work.
If it's within their scope of work of what they're proposing.
what they're intending to do. Okay.
Right.
So right now, we don't have a scope of work line around this yet,
Well,
what I'm looking at.
yeah, there's,
It's what,
So it's just the building itself?
right.
the fence is
That's
not
the
part of
scope of
it.
work? Okay, all right. Okay, other questions? Okay. No other questions, let's go to comments. And, I can't remember what, so it's again, comments only because it still requires a zoning modification request, and I think we went over that.
Right, this is the secondary front.
And also staff, or coastal review. Okay, so other comments?
Yes.
Yes.
I think your changes are really great. I think the elevations are very nice. I like, excuse me, I think it fits within our guidelines, and it certainly fits within the neighborhood of this area of Braemar. In this particular case, this is a neighborhood where standing seam metal roofs are appropriate, in my opinion. Well, that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, other comments?
Yeah, I'll comment. I'm a little disappointed in the decision to not do any sort of landscaping, at least close to the house. But, okay, and I am in support. It's on. I support the standing seam metal roof. I'm talking to your microphone. There are lots of standing seam metal roofs in that area, and it's very, it's Yankee Farm and Braemar Ranch, so very fabric of the neighborhood.
I think you've done a nice job of, when we looked at it before, between the roof and it was spread out, so it didn't, we made a comment, I think we made a comment that it just wasn't, the whole front elevation and the back elevation didn't tie together. And I think you've done a really nice job of changing the roof lines and bringing the building together and making it look more word compatible with itself, fits with itself, front elevation.
I have a quick question. I'm sorry.
Yes.
What's this material here? Is that?
That would be a weathered cedar siding.
Nice.
And the rest of the house would be a plaster, possibly integral color.
It fits, it looks a lot nicer.
And then just to be clear for everyone, because there's not a line on this drawing, the modification is basically somewhere right there?
Yes.
And the other one is over here somewhere?
Through basically almost the middle of this, yes.
So if we're to give it comments today, and if we're inclined to endorse what's being presented, then we want to make a statement about whether or not we think it's ready to go to the staff hearing officer. And if someone makes a motion to that effect, then we have to be definitive about the aesthetic elements that are under that modification, if you're so inclined to make that kind of a motion. Are there other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just handed you a picture of the driveway, which I'm really having a problem if somebody's going to do all that knocking down and rebuilding, but keeping a lot of that driveway. It just doesn't really seem to fit the whole design concept.
Okay. Other comments? I'll follow up on that. Yeah, I'm really perplexed that, yes, they're going to spend all this money to do this part of the house, and yet they're not going to fix that driveway. And to repair it, let me finish, to repair it, I mean, I've been out to the site and I've walked the site. The damage is extensive, so it's like you have to rebuild it. So by the time they get in there to do whatever, they're going to be rebuilding it. So I think we need to see a repair plan in some detail. What are they really going to do? And, because look at that. I mean, half of it is just filled in gravel. The other half appears to be asphalt or concrete. So I think we really need to see how they're going to deal with that driveway. I agree with you, Bernie. I think that's a little bit perplexing in terms of the amount of money that's going to be spent. With regards to what's been presented as the architecture, I think it does what we asked it to do. I think that the alignment of the glazing elements, the fenestrations are now, I think, in a nice rhythm. The pattern language of the elevations, I think, work quite nicely. So I think that kind of all comes together. I guess I'm not completely convinced about the slopes of these roofs. I think it would look better if they came up further and this appeared to get a little bit more tucked into the whole composition. But it's not, in my view, a deal breaker for giving this project the go-ahead. But I am concerned about this whole driveway thing.
It says on here, review after final. Did we all?
No.
Am I on the wrong page?
You're on the wrong page. So it's comments only. So we're,
Oh, okay.
we're
Thank
here,
you.
as I said before, the applicant is wishing to proceed to the staff hearing officer, and if we're so inclined to encourage that to happen, then the staff hearing officer is going to want to hear about our comments about these two sides of the house in terms of the modification.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to make a couple of comments before we make a motion. We have to make these quick decisions, and I'm having second thoughts about a decision I made on the last project already, and I'm really having second thoughts about the overall design on this project. I know the neighborhood, I know there's a lot of development going on, and I know what it looks like, but when we take a completely different approach to the rural character of a neighborhood, I don't think it fits. I don't think it meets our guidelines.
Other comments?
I have a couple. The first comment, I know there's a strong feeling of the previous project, but what the house was existing was a modern 50s house, and you're making it a modern 21st century house, but it's still, the size, bulk, and scale is still appropriate. The plate heights are appropriate, or not, it doesn't, it's all fitting in the fabric of the neighborhood, so I think it's fine. It is consistent with our design guidelines.
I think it is too. I like what you've done to it. I think it's consistent with adding a second story to a one-story house and keeping the same. It's 50, 30, 40 years later. Something's got to change.
So I think the issue of got to change is perplexing, because we know change is going to occur. We know things are going to happen. Houses are going to get bigger. Houses are getting torn down. We saw one. We had to go do a site visit earlier in the day. But the nature and character and fabric of the neighborhood is what the council has asked us to do in terms of changing the dynamic of a neighborhood, in my view, in a very overt way. And that's probably what our biggest challenge is.
Right.
So I agree, changes are going to happen, but I don't know that we're here to just say, well, it's a change, let's just let it happen.
True.
Okay? We can allow changes to happen, but I think we have to worry about how it fits into the overall context. In this particular case, I'm not terribly concerned about the size, scale, and the bulk. The size is not any much larger than other properties, the 2 projects we just approved in this same neighborhood a block away. It's not larger than many of the other properties on the same lane. And the scale is appropriate. It's, the plates are at 8 feet. Most cases, there's a couple of 9 feet. So the scale is right. The bulk is centered to the house, so I can, visualize that. So I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem about is that it's coming with no offer of dealing with the landscaping. And as I've kind of said before, a good piece of architecture is not just the architecture, it's the setting in which it sits and the landscaping. They really kind of need to work together, and that's what I'm not seeing here. But on the other hand, we can't force an applicant who has a budget to go out and do that. I guess, Katie, one question, if at some point the applicant finds the financing or whatever to deal with the landscaping, do they have to come back to us with a landscape plan? How does that work?
They might come to consent for review, but since it's not a change to an approved landscape plan.
But to do any landscaping, do they have to have review by this board? Can they just go out and landscape it?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The city placed specific restrictions on 2 elements. One, anything that this board can condition as a requirement of an approval can in fact be maintained as an approved landscape plan, which Katie mentioned. And also the removal of major trees that are either placed on the property and have some regulations. That's limited in the backyards, though, on property. So that's why we refer to an approved landscape plan.
Could this board, if they felt they needed to, could they require at least a concept landscape plan for project design approval, even if the applicant chose not to initiate it immediately?
Yes, but you should make a connection that the amount of development triggers this requirement to enhance the project. Normally, we don't necessarily require a landscape plan when someone adds to a home, unless you could make a connection that some of the landscaping is being removed and therefore should be replaced, or there's a need to enhance the property because it's substandard.
And in this case, where it appears that virtually the whole exterior skin is being changed, the architecture is being changed, there's a fairly major second floor addition, is it this board's determination the extent of what we feel is a change that would trigger requirements?
Well, again, I would focus on what's existing and how it's being altered. We don't like to see a vast removal of existing landscape, existing that surrounds the home. Right. And so if you make a connection that the existing is being altered, it would be appropriate to ask that it be provided to make sure we don't have undeveloped areas that don't have any landscaping.
And given the nature of this property, there are a few dead trees out here, because you can see them.
Down lower.
I do want to qualify that. It would not be appropriate to ask for a complete landscape of the entire site. You'd have to connect it to
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So we have some purview, but we can't tell an applicant, look, we need you to landscape 15 acres of land just because we want to see it.
Just associated with the structures that are being altered.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's why I'm trying to get clear, because I have a sense it's bothering us, but on the other hand, we can't force people to do stuff that they don't have money to do. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, you want to make a motion, please?
I would like to continue the project to the staff hearing officer with the following comments: that the board finds the 2 modifications appropriate to this neighborhood, and in this particular case, finds the aesthetic of both modifications appropriate. And that's that. That's my motion.
That's the motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second it.
Okay. Is there further discussion to the motion on the floor? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
One opposition? Abstentions? No abstentions. Okay, thank you. We'll see you after you get back from the staff hearing officer. Thank you. All right, let's stack those back with that. Yeah, you give it to Katie. You give it to Katie. Okay, let's go to 1625 Overlook Lane.
I just need to keep one copy to the other two.
Oh, got it.
So you can take those two sets and I'll just keep this. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to abstain from this since I was not at the review of the story poll, so I don't think it's appropriate. But I will make, read the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine, we got brought up there. It's exactly the same.
Would you feel comfortable with pictures if they're going to show? Because you have pictures of the story poles that.
No.
Oh,
I didn't print them out, but we do have pictures, yeah.
Okay, this is 1625 Overlook Lane. This is a fourth concept review. Any action may be taken if sufficient information is provided. Projects requires compliance with Tier 3 Stormwater Management Program and was last reviewed on April 17, 2017. The board did conduct a site visit at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If you could introduce yourselves, please.
Sure. Ryan Mills with DMHA.
Sean Lynch with DMHA.
Welcome. Mr. Miller, if you could read our comments from our last review, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The board appreciated the redesign of the project and had positive comments regarding the project's change requested by the board, reduced FAR, and efforts to satisfy good neighbor guidelines. Number 2, prior to the project's return for review, the applicant shall place accurate story poles on the project site at the B level for review by interested neighbors and the full board as a group during the scheduled site visit and tour by staff. Action taken by Champendal, seconded by Bernstein. Motion was carried.
Okay, thank you. So we did go out to and look at the site this afternoon, and I'm sure at that point we'll get some comments, but do you have anything else to present today?
No, we had a quick recap, but otherwise we didn't want to get too ahead of ourselves, so we set up the story polls, and just as the only points we wanted to make as a refresher was this being our fourth visit, we kind of felt, as a reminder, the 3 things we focused on was FAR, which we got to 87, overall height, we were well under the guidelines, and we really studied hard the guidelines to design this for Hillside. Design vernacular, I think we discussed last time. So today we're just looking forward to comments on the story polls, and pending how that goes, would love PDA to move forward, and then we would be returning with all the details.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to public comment, Mr. Lamone is here today, and I asked him to come forward just to remind the board their obligations, their purview extent for dealing with second floors, et cetera.
Mr. Chair, I just thought I'd quote some of the sections that are in your single-family residential design guidelines that speak to specific good neighbor guidelines and tips. The City of Santa Barbara specifically has guidelines with respect to privacy, landscaping, noise, and lighting. And you often practice consistency with those guidelines when you review projects for protecting neighbors from possible impacts related to these issues. Where it's a little more difficult is the protection of private views. The city specifically refrained from developing regulations to protect private views and chose to include tips that should be considered. So when you review a project, typically one of the first things that you should ask of the architects is, did they consider impacts to private views? And in general, is there consistency, general consistencies with good neighbor guideline consistency? And in those terms, one could look at a project and see, yes, the project has minimized the height or placed the location of additions to minimize these privacy impacts. And that's really what's before you typically when you deal with those issues.
Okay.
Wait, could you say that last thing?
That the consideration is typically, has the architect demonstrated that there was, in fact, consideration to minimize blockage of private views by either the placement or the lowering of the location of the actual new buildings or additions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so before we come, the conversation comes to the board, let's go to the public. I have some speaker slips, and we also had some letters issued. So let's go to the speakers first. So John Main, our first speaker, if you'll come up and use this microphone, please.
No.
My name is John Main. I live at 1615 Overlook, next door to 1625 Overlook.
You can move the microphone, please. There you go.
Is that okay?
There you go.
Yeah, either one, but yeah, the green lights.
Have a choice.
Sorry.
Well, you have to get closer to it, though.
Thank you for visiting today. I hope you were overwhelmed by the height of this project as much as we are. I would like to use my brief time here to discuss another dimension, the length, or as it's called in your guidelines, the downhill run or horizontal distance. Is this right side up?
Put it right in the middle.
Put it right there.
Right there and turn them.
He'll bring it, the camera guy will bring it down.
Okay. Thank you. This is, I'd like to discuss the horizontal distance. In your guidelines that were updated in 2011, there is a specific section that says, that discusses hillside housing. On 29.4, let's pick this up and read it exactly, please. Homes with a total run of less than 60 feet in horizontal distance for combined steps are preferred. Seems pretty clear to me. And it gives a couple of examples. It gives one that is approximately 66 feet, which it doesn't like, and one that's 50 feet that it does like. I made an approximation from the back of the garage to the front of the front bedroom is 118 feet. To me, this is a little more than 60 feet. Specifically, in your guidelines, it does say 60 feet is preferred. I can see going a little over that, but 118 feet seems to me to be excessive. Along with the height, I believe this house is too big. So I find it hard to believe that something like this can be approved that contradicts the City of Santa Barbara guidelines by such a wide margin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Mavis. Please.
If I want to put my picture somewhere.
They have to go up here.
Okay.
Yep. They have to go
Upside down
the
for
other
you.
way here.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you, oops.
Just turn
You're
them.
gonna have to read them upside down.
They have to be upside down to you,
Okay.
because they're on the camera.
I'm very happy.
There you
There,
go, right there.
how's that? All right. First, I want to thank you for your site visit today. And then I'd like to review our perception of 1625 Overlook Lane project using 3 photos. If you look here, you will see from the first time they put in the story poles, that was the line that went across and blocked that view. After the new story poles were put in by the surveyors, it has gone up approximately 5 feet and has blocked an additional view. Here, you can see that the coastline, the ocean, and now the islands have been. We used to be able to see a little bit of the islands. And so, this will be our view. And I put some trees because we will be able to see a couple of trees. I would also like, in closing, to using Loy and John Beardsmore words that so eloquently stated on how we feel. And they go, Mr. Surian has consistently shown that he wants what he wants, and the board is the only entity standing between him and longtime neighbors losing what they cherish. Does the SFDB allow one part-time property owner to wield so much power at the odds of his neighbors? One new neighbor can take away what has been of value to his neighbors that have lived on the street for decades. Seems considerably out of balance. Is it any wonder that animosity exists between neighbors if the board allows such designs to move forward at the expense and consideration of so many? Please seriously consider the irreversible long-term ramifications if you allow this design to move forward in the interest of one resident over the objections of so many others.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Martha Kay, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for coming by to check the situation out today. From our perspective, we don't have the same blockage that the mains have, but I have a question of the architects based on a picture taken Thursday, this last April 27th. That was the positioning of the lines on that day of the story pole, the pink lines going across. And my point of reference is that clump of dates on the palm tree, because when Saturday came around, the story poles, there had been some wind, and the story poles came down about a foot on Saturday, and that's reflected in this picture. And today, there's a new positioning or a positioning of the poles that appears to show that that they must be where you wanted them to be by today. I didn't know whether wind had come through the night before like we'd had, and that was the reason for changing it. Can you tell me why the original picture showed the poles being so high up on the tree, and then the next day farther down? And my thought is, when final construction takes place, how do we know what the dirt levels are going to be where those poles are? And this is from our back deck. I did widen it a bit so I could get the similar view. And then I drew in some lines. I'm not sure they're correct there, just to kind of see the configuration of what we would be looking at as well. Does this look accurate to you?
I can respond if
Oh,
that's
thank
all
you.
right. So Friday.
Can
we
you
ha-
speak into the microphone, please?
So Thursday, Friday, we had them up there, and they were finalizing it Friday. So what you saw Thursday was them getting it up, measuring it, making sure it was correct. I came up Friday, made comments, and then the wind took them down Saturday, and they actually took them down again on Sunday. So it fell this morning. So I was actually on site this morning, and we made sure it was back up. Just one of them went down. So
Well, I just have those 3 days.
yeah,
as
the
pointed
last 2 days where it's the consistent is
where it is
was
now.
measured correctly. Yes.
I mean, the only thing I can speak to these, kind of on the fly here, is like I'm noticing the vantage points are different. That's probably why the height relative to the hedge may be a little different. Like I don't, I
well,
see the power pole here, but I don't in this view.
The power pole, yeah, I didn't
So
take a tree
it's
out,
hard,
but I'm
hard for
sorry.
me to comment on these.
Yeah, I guess in taking it with my cell phone, I widened it at one point, and it may have widened the tree or the power pole out of it. But my question is, how do we know when you take the trees out, which is the plan, where the actual
Ma'am,
roof
your
line- I'm
time's
sorry.
up, and I will
Okay.
answer that question along with the architect, okay?
Okay.
So we'll do
Thank
that
you. All
in
right, I'm
our
sorry, I
comments,
didn't
okay?
mean to take
Thank
so
you.
much.
And can we hold on to these?
Sure.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the board? If not, any further communications?
I believe you received an email.
Okay.
Two.
Two
emails,
excuse
correct.
me.
Okay. All right, any questions from the board on the public comment received? You all had a chance to look at the letters? Okay. Then the chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. Who has questions?
I do. So I think what was confusing to me out there was the piece that sticks out the furthest, or the furthest downhill. And that is a two-story, or that's what's a one-story element, is it not?
So I have the story. I just want to see, use this as reference. So here's the existing garage. So are you speaking of this?
So the street is here.
The street is overlooked.
Yeah, I'm speaking of this portion.
Yeah. So what?
That's a one-story element?
This is on top of a podium, and there is a bedroom below it, yes.
Okay, so that's a two-story element.
Let's look at
And sections will show it as well.
sections or elevations. So where are we?
More. There you go.
The master, is that what we're talking about?
Yes,
Is that
correct.
This one?
This piece,
Yes.
Okay. So it's that.
And what's your,
So
what are the
it's-
plate heights on those?
Yeah, let me show you in section. It's kind of. So that's, where are we there? So that's this element you're seeing. So it's sitting over subterraneous. That's the cellar below it.
This is existing grade?
That's the grade. So to the outside, that's existing grade. So that total height is what you're looking for at the farthest?
So the story pole point that we saw today is right there, correct?
Correct.
That point right there,
That's correct.
from the grade that we were standing on.
So then okay. So that's kind of cantilevered over then somehow, or you're filling, you're digging down and then creating this space underneath, or it's just?
Yeah, what you're seeing, today you saw from here to here, where when the project gets constructed, we're stepping. So there'll be, this will be on the outside. We'll have landscape, which you can see in elevation.
It just seemed incredibly tall. What is the plate height here?
The plate height in the master is, here we are. Where is it? Should be-
What scale is it? This is 3/16.
Yeah.
No, this is the wrong. Yeah, this is modeled accurately.
So the bottom, it's 9 feet.
9 feet?
Inside, with the foot.
However, since the whole thing is kind of raised up off the natural grade, it's way up in the air.
It's from the grade, from existing grade, it measures
17 feet.
17 feet.
17 feet, right.
And remember, a one-story building under city zoning definition is 17 feet 6 inches.
Also, my next question is the placement on the site. I noticed that from the old house, you have bumped everything very forward, and I suppose that's to maximize the views. Is that correct?
Let's see, that's existing condition. So there's a couple, like, this descriptive. So there's a couple key reasons. So one was pulling the cars up to the top of the site, just because, all the view orientation is out, obviously, towards the island and downtown view. So the site's kind of flipped to begin with. So we wanted to put the cars to the back of the site. And then the big decision to be made, and it kind of goes to hillside guidelines, is rather than stacking program, so the house wants to sit as a start towards the back of the site. So rather than stacking 2 levels, we opted for pushing down. Now, it kind of stretches things out. So our decision was, what's the right balancing act between stacking and getting to more one-story volumes? The consequence of one-story volumes or so is it just starts pulling down the site a little bit. So we're kind of trying to hunker down the site. But obviously our kind of the view corridor is out and through the front of our site.
And yet, in doing so, it doesn't really terrace down the site that much, does it? I mean, you still have this built way up, this master bedroom. above the existing grade. And that's my primary concern here, is that instead of kind of coming down, you're really not taking I mean, what's the difference from here to here? I mean, it's barely terracing down, you know.
This is to the top of the roof there, from existing grade is 16 feet. From the existing grade to the top of the roof is 17 and a half feet. So again, a single-story building is defined in the zoning code as 17 feet 6 inches for a single-story house. So that's 17 from existing grade. This one from existing grade is 10, almost 11 feet. So the grade is here. So they're down in the grade at the backside 6 feet, a couple of feet up here. And they're down in the grade 4.5 feet here and almost 2.5 feet there. So.
And a quick answer was, I mean, for that particular component, I mean, our constraint is that deck level. So everything's sort of sitting on top of the other. So, you know.
Speak in the microphone, please.
So our challenge here is, so this constraint, again, 9 feet for a master suite, we think is the appropriate plate. So, and again, yes, we are coming out a few feet from the site. What is driving that is this deck and the level below. Again, we're pushing that lower level down the site. So we really want to use that, step out, and rather than seeing a flat roof, we want to use that for deck space. So we're stepping down to that, and we actually even pushed that down a little bit more, so we actually stepped down on it. But that's the driver, so, 9 feet here and 9 feet here. And the only other place we have to go is, looking at pushing this lower level down a little bit. I mean, and that's working with the site. So the more we push, the more earth we're cutting and the more truck trips we're taking too. So this is a tricky problem to solve, but that's the constraint. So 9-foot plates stepping up on these two levels.
And again, the positioning of this whole home on the site, is there any way you can push it back further on the site?
We're really tight on room. We can't have any of our open yard requirements in the front setback, and so we have to push it all in the back. So with the current design, we can't, this is our open yard area. So if we push anything further, again, we're moving this, that'd be a second story somewhere else, blocking other views. So we're trying to minimize the massing.
I could say, we obviously could look at a couple feet. We do have some.
Where is this point in relationship to the existing house? Do you have that on the map?
So the back corner of the existing house is about 2.5. Oh, there you go.
You could see here, so we do have a garage which goes 20 feet out this way. This isn't to scale, but it's approximately.
So that back corner is what we're seeing on that other drawing.
Yeah, and the garage is just a single level.
It appears to be you're 10 feet setback. This line here was that stone wall we saw today, correct?
Yes.
That's existing?
There's two of them.
And then that's the higher stone wall the fence was sitting on?
Yes.
And the bougainvillea that we were looking at was kind of like right here, I think.
Yeah, for context, existing house sits here. It's actually in its setbacks, so where it's actually pushed a little too far in a couple locations.
Yeah.
It doesn't comply currently. But yeah, it's pushed very far back.
However, when I look at this, I can see the neighbors upset with the fact that they've been living with this home that's way back there, and now suddenly you have come clear out here into the front and completely obscured.
But just to be
probably
aware,
50% of a neighbor's view.
Looking at the view, as you guys saw, it was a very small portion of an overall view. That's just what
Not really. Not really, not in my opinion. But anyway, thanks for answering the questions. I appreciate that.
Okay, are there other questions?
Well, I'm trying to understand, when we stood in the back, you and I, Fred, and there was that fence.
Yes, right here.
So I'm trying to understand where that driveway is going to be starting. So it's not where the driveway.
The current driveway is over here that we walked up. It's going to be over there.
Uphill side.
So it's towards Cleveland School, so to speak.
but here's the house, so it's on the left side of the house.
Yes, it's towards.
And in the back,
Right,
behind,
towards
okay.
So the retaining wall, we were looking at, the stone wall was here with the white fence on top of it. That citrus tree with the bougainvillea that overtook it is about right there. The lower stone wall that we saw is right here, and the back of the house that we walked back of is about right there. Okay, and this driveway, the current driveway, comes up like this and comes into the garage here.
Oh, I see. So it's just started the street, though, still.
So the driveway starts at the street down here and goes that way.
Okay, I get it.
And the house, the first piece of real house is whatever feet that is from the street. What is that, Mark?
We have what scale is it there?
What's the scale here? 1/8 of an inch. Where's the architectural scale go?
It was just out.
It disappeared.
No, it's right here, I got it. So that is 58 feet, 57.5 feet from the street, curb, back to the front of the house. The first corner of the house is 57 feet back. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Let's go to comments. I believe that the applicant is still pursuing project design approval. And I believe our discussion at the last meeting was there were comments in favor of proceeding, but before we did any further discussion, everyone felt we ought to do story polls. So that's what we did today. So I think that's the points of our comments. We either have to determine that we're satisfied with what the architects have presented, the applicant has presented, and give it project design approval. We could give it project design approval with comments for them to return. We could deny project design approval and just give them more comments and have them return. So we've got a few options. So comments.
Comments. Well, I'd like to see some more changes personally. I was astounded by the one neighbor, these folks here that commented first when I saw the story polls and just what it was doing to the value of their property. And I think even though we are not supposed to be that concerned with personal, private views, the truth of the matter is, in areas like this, that's what drives the value of the properties. And it's just something that I don't think can be ignored. And this is it was really a big obstruction of their view. And that's really bothering me. I think there's some way to lower that piece or push it back somewhere to get it out of that, to diminish the blockage. Then I think you'd have a project I could support. But as it is right now, I can't. I just really can't, with good faith, support it until something is redesigned in that area. I don't have any problem with the gym. That didn't seem to be blocking anybody's view, but that portion really did.
I think the story polls pointed out that I walked up all the way, all the lots along, and all the lots slope down, and they all have views. And I'm an architect. You're an architect. We design what our client wants and what we want. We all looked at that second story in the back, and yes, it does not block anybody's views because it's far enough back, and it's really not that much higher than the house to the southwest that took advantage of this old house that you're demolishing it. But the story polls pointed out that like Denise said, the new architects that are designing houses on that hill are trying to take views or obtain views that are the whole ocean. And what you're doing is you're obtaining with this design a view of the whole of 60, 150 degrees of ocean, and you're eliminating one other person's half their view of the islands and the ocean, and even more than half. And maybe nothing this board can do about it, but it's a shame we can't, and it's the way the ordinance is worded, that we're not allowed to preserve private views, and Santa Barbara is turning into a lot of private views. I won't go any farther.
Okay. Other comments?
Well, I don't really want to talk about the view so much. I understand all the different points of view, but I just was standing, looking carefully at the story poles, and really appreciate, because that gives me a good vision. And I just think overall, the house it's too tall. That top piece is. I was standing next to it, and I was like, wow, that thing's really tall, and it's really high from the street, so I think the house is still moving in the right direction with the architecture, but I think it's too tall, and it might even be too big and bulky.
Other comments?
If I can, though. I appreciate the value of the story poles. That really illuminated what we could not see. And I feel that I'd like to see you niggle it around just a little bit more. I think that there's room for improvement still. So I'm having a hard time supporting the existing configuration, despite all the good work you've done so far.
Thank you. Brian?
I had no comment because I wasn't there, so I'm abstaining from any comment.
Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit of, part of the challenge here this board has is to as we review these buildings, is to try to divorce ourselves from the ownership issue. Whether the owner's there some of the time, all of the time, none of the time, that's not what we're supposed to be looking at. What we're looking at is a structure that'll be there probably a lot longer than we are, or even the current owner is, because the current owner could sell it tomorrow. So our issue is neighborhood compatibility for the structure. And one of the things that you've worked on is this notion, I have to put this to the right, the notion in our guidelines of cascading down the hill. All of these little sketches that are in the guidelines want us to look at homes that are cascading down the hill. And to some extent, that's kind of what they've done. If you looked at the sections, they've kind of kept it under 17 feet 6 all the way cascading down the hill, with the exception of that point right there. Now, yes, when we walked up the driveway this morning or this afternoon, this element here, which was in story pole shape, does appear to be large. But what I was really working on was comparing that form to the houses immediately to the west, not the immediate house to the west, because it sits further back up on the hill, but the next house over. Remember when I asked about, do we have the elevation of that roof? Okay. And then immediately looking to the east property that sits right next to it, and looking at those forms and shape with a relationship to this form and shape. And standing then at the bottom of the hill on the street, looking back up at the story poles and looking at it in relationship to the house on the east and the homes that proceed to the west towards Cleveland School. And so I was kind of less concerned about the shape and the height issue from the street. So yes, is the house big? The house is big, okay? The house is big. But as we've asked, and the tool that we have in our toolkit is the FAR, and they brought it down to 87%. Now, can we push for 85? Probably, but is that a lot of square footage when we're talking about 2%? So, part of the challenge here is this is going to be, this is, whether we like it or not, it's going to be a transition neighborhood because there is a lot of homes along the whole street that comes out to APS. There's a whole bunch of homes in here that need a lot of TLC, and there's some homes in here probably when they do get that TLC, the property ownership is going to change. And I've already gotten wind of the fact that I think it's this house or this house is going to come to us for a second floor. That's coming at us, okay? And so a lot of these things are going to, and we had a letter today that says, one of these property owners up on here, and I should be doing this correctly, Cleveland School is down here, is thinking, oh, well, I'm going to add a second floor. So that's kind of our challenge here, because this neighborhood is going to change, and I think you talked about it earlier about neighborhoods changing, and so how do we deal with that? The other thing that I looked at as I was looking and observing the story poles from the house on the west is if you looked at the horizon of the ocean in Santa Cruz Island, and then you see the mesa, and you see downtown Santa Barbara over here, Arlington, whatever it is, or Granada, and then the harbor, and then the wharf. What I noticed is, yes, a piece of the view is going to be gone. But I also, as I was looking to the right, that's why I was asking about that house and that roof over here. If you looked over here, what would we have done with that house had it come to this board when this board existed? This house was probably done before this board existed, so we wouldn't have looked at it. But it, in fact, took away a view to the west. You can see how it kind of blocked out a view towards, what would that be, kind of out towards San Roque, the Upper East. So do we owe these folks that total view? Do we owe everybody that total view? Do we owe this guy that total view? That's kind of our dilemma. I bought my house, I bought that view. 40 years later, somebody wants to do something over here and somebody wants to do something over here. Are we obligated to give them, as I think, Joe, you were pointing out, the 180 or 150 degree view? Are we obligated for everybody to get that view? In the house that we look next door, we're again looking at the horizon and Santa Cruz Island and whatever, we were looking straight out and there was a hedge, and then you could see where the top of this house is going to be, the second, this piece up here was going to be right there. And so one of my first concerns was, and I think I had already expressed it, about the glazing that's going to be either in or out on those two elevations, because it's right up against the hedge, and that's looking straight down from the deck of this home. Part of the problem of looking at photographs is you can't see it in the whole. The photographs isolate things, and as we just figured out a few minutes ago, if you move your point of where you've taken the picture from, things change immediately. All of a sudden, the telephone pole disappears where it was in the previous photograph because you used the zoom lens or whatever. So photographs don't tell the whole story. I think we've learned that. So I looked at that and I said, okay, yes, these folks are going to lose a little bit of their view of downtown. They're going to not see a couple of buildings that are along State Street down here, but they're going to still see the wharf. They're still going to see the islands. They're still going to see the mesa, et cetera. So, that's kind of the challenge in my view is, are we obligated to allow folks to have all of that view? Do we tell this guy, no, you can't have that view, but the guys that got here before you got here first, they get to have the view? That's kind of, in some ways, that's kind of, I got here first, so anybody that comes second, out of luck, Chuck. And that's kind of what this board gets presented with is, how do we arrive at a solution that allows an applicant, regardless of who it is, how much money the person has, do we allow an applicant to impose on a group of homes? Now, one of the other interesting, the same property, when we walk down to the orchard, that thing goes completely away because the site drops down. We couldn't see past the hedge. The story poles disappeared. They went away. So that meant that this hedge that's there now and the orchard and the trees that are there now block it out. Now, that's not to say, okay, in the future, some new owner owns this home, they cut the hedge down to 6 feet or whatever, and they take out the orchard, and all of a sudden, oh, now I can see the top of that house. So, are we the cause of that happening for a future owner? We don't have control over that. So that's some of the thought behind, in my view, of how you look at this. And so, the dilemma is, do we try to hold on to everybody's given view, and by not allowing the new applicant to have their right to have a second floor, and then also, if we do allow a second floor, where is it positioned and what is it allowed to do? And the same goes looking at it from the street up the hill, has been pointed out by a couple of people that were concerned about the scale of the story poles. So that's kind of the issue. I'm not certain that manipulating more of this house at this point is going to get a solution that folks are going to be happy with.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may?
Sure.
I think that the answer is the degrees of view that are destroyed by any given new home. I think that some of those folks that had a little bit of city view taken out, even though that's not great, it's not as bad as what happened to these folks over here. So it's a matter of degrees. I think some people have a little bit more of a reason to gripe than others.
The views aren't destroyed, they're blocked.
Well, in this case, I think they were fairly destroyed. But this is why I have this house that I wanted to add to our what not to approve list. It was a situation very similar to this where we very quickly made a determination that we didn't take care of, it wasn't in our purview to look at views. And the neighbor of this person on Yankee Farm built an addition to their house that was already huge. I don't know how this got by us, and it literally took out just about 100% of these people's view. And I don't think it should have ever been passed the way that it was passed, and this is reminiscent of that to me. And so I'm just really trying to do right, in this arena, because we did real wrong for someone else. And I know that we have a lot of projects that we see, and we can't be right all the time. But when we have an opportunity like this, and we've seen with our own eyes what's going to happen to somebody, I think we should take some action about it. And I think it's a beautiful project, though, don't get me wrong, and I'm really grateful for the direction you're going. But if there's some way to bring that master suite down, I would certainly love to see that. Or if you can somehow reconfigure it so that it's not sticking out so far down the lot, I mean, I know that's a lot of work for you guys, but I think it's important.
Okay, other comments? Okay, the applicant needs some direction, so we'll need someone put together a motion of some sort. As I said, you can either approve it, not approve it, do comments, bring it back.
May I add anything before that?
Yes, go ahead.
I appreciate all those comments, and it isn't that we were blind to that. We were well aware of the challenges, and I just think this diagram kind of explains that pretty well. Our starting point was just about as beneficial to all the views as you could start, besides being an empty lot. You can see the existing house is quite small, pushed all the way to the back, even within the setback. So So views, as you can see, all the photo sims we're looking at are completely across our property. So I understand the value of that. It's something we've been trying to be mindful. We are aware views will be affected. We do. And that's something we all have to try to figure out how to design around. Our approach always was, using this site. So if you look at all the adjacent parcels, if you look in the context of the loop, we're using the same envelope. That's the site we chose. There's a lower deck, but it's well below the hedge. So in context of parcel to parcel, we're doing like for like. So the challenge is, eliminating views that people have been used to for so long that's strictly across our property. That's challenging. I understand that. So our other decision then is, we know there's about 5 properties up here that can see over ours. So we always opted for minimizing the effects to most of the neighbors, knowing full well it was very impactful to this one. So that was just where we were coming from a balancing act. So starting from a really tough place, we were trying to be thoughtful. We know our job is to reconcile all the project goals with kind of the palette we're given. So that's why we landed where we are. If there is comments, we need to really understand. We feel like we really dug in, stuck to every single guideline the city's provided. We're falling under all of those. Besides that 1 2-story element, we are, nearly a 1-story project cascading down the hill. So if that's not acceptable, we have to understand where we are not abiding by the city's rules or guidelines. So if that's the case, we feel like we have tracked that very well. So we would need very clear comments to show us, per all the city guidelines, where we are in error or where we are not following those, so we can respond correctly.
And just to add, the owner offered, we dropped the building by 2 feet to minimize views, and he's actually offered to underground we'll probably have to do 3 telephone poles that would affect these neighbors right here. So, he's trying to be a good neighbor, and this is now, we're in a tough spot. So just wanted to make sure that you're aware that he's doing what he can
Sure.
to
I understand.
be a good neighbor.
Well, I guess I would be interested in seeing if there was any way you can drop the master bedroom more. I know it means more export. I would rather see more export than see it the way it is, personally, so that you can drop that down and at least give them the islands back.
We could.
May not be able to get, you're not going to get all of it back, but something that can just drop that master, I think that would be a really great thing to do for the neighborhood.
That's something we probably could condition. If we could make some forward progress, we could study how, take another 2 feet on those lower portions to keep digging down. I think we'd be open to that.
That would be great if we could do that.
Okay, the chair would look for a motion then.
All right. Shall I make that?
Well, before we make a motion, let's take a little check on how people on the board feel about the upper thing that I was standing next to staring up at the top. The gym.
Right.
You mean the
level.
The gym?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, we
Don't think
haven't
that's-
talked about it yet.
Well, let's talk about it. I don't think it's far enough back on the lot that it really doesn't interfere with anybody's, at least the am I pronouncing it right? The man's? Yeah, it doesn't obstruct their view.
No, I know it doesn't obstruct views, I don't think, but I was just concerned about the size, bulk, and scale of that piece.
I don't think it,
It's buried in foliage.
And they're both 9-foot plates.
yeah, they're
so
9-foot plates, so they're not that big.
pretty small.
Yeah.
In terms of floor ceiling.
It was so surprising to me that wasn't the problem, quite honestly, when we went out there, because I was all geared for the gym to be the issue, and it turns out it wasn't really.
Me, so maybe I'm the only one.
Well, the whole thing looks really tall, but then you have to also remember that the grade isn't where it's going to be either. So it's deceiving right now. It's really deceiving, you know, when you see the story pole sticking up without the finished grade complete. It's gonna look a lot different, you know, when it's done.
No, the story poles are where the story poles, the lines are
Where
where the lines are supposed to
outline
be.
of the building
They're-
is.
That's
Yeah.
where they are.
Yeah.
The matter, ground is,
But there's also going to be some landscape that'll
What I
change
might
that.
take just a minute to do, because a question came up from one of the speakers, is the story poles that you see, those elevations are in fact the elevations. These drawings, when they go to the building department, have to show the elevations and all the measurements, and the elevations are based on these contour lines. So that all is documented. It's done by a surveyor. So when this home gets built, it gets built to these documents. So the heights that you see, the heights that we look at and review in this process, do in fact get solidified under the building department's approval of this set of drawings. So it has to do with the elevations that come off of these. They don't get to vary. It's what's on these drawings that finally get approved that counts. That process will come to us at a point where this project is ready to receive project design approval, in which case we'll be looking at the drawings to confirm that the elevation points are set and will be set by the civil engineer and by the surveyor. So that's kind of how that works. So it has to do with exactly what's on these drawings. So it's not a hit or miss one way or the other. If it says 112 foot elevation, or in this case, it'll be 270 some feet above sea level, that's where it is. Okay, other comments?
I have one other
Yes.
question. So when we were up there today, we were shown where the new swimming pool is going to go. Can you tell me what the size of the deck is and where is it in relation to the swimming pool?
show them, just probably on this.
You haven't shown it on
To
here.
the existing pool? Is that
No, the
the
new
question?
pool, where the new pool and how big is the deck and where does the deck go?
So here's the main living area, the master box. So you saw the three boxes today, the upper one, the main one, and the master one. So the lower box you saw, so directly to the south is where the pool sits.
And putting the pool on the one that we looked
So
at today.
it'll approximately be somewhere in this area.
And here's the existing driveway. Show the existing driveway right now,
Yeah,
where it comes
existing
out.
driveway.
See the route? So no. So, yeah,
Well,
you're
that's
right
the,
because
yeah.
of
So it's approximately right here,
Mm-hmm.
and then the existing driveway comes up like this. This is the existing driveway.
Okay, so you're drawing the pool and where's the deck?
it's
This is deck here.
yeah. So
But there's another
Oh.
deck.
the lower level. So there's deck between, right? So that's the eave. So there's the glazing from the main living level to the front edge of the pool, then the pool, and then we have 2 steps down, and that's the roof of the lowest level, which is also we're using it.
That's the roof, yeah, I see that. And, okay, so that's pretty big, right? What size is that? Just curious.
Well, let's go to the lower floor plan.
Wait a minute. There's a difference between a terrace and deck. So this terrace, at this point, is how the surface of that terrace, how far it is above the grade, more or less.
3 steps, 4 steps. So we'll be 30 inches max above
So
grade. at
30
that point.
inches,
Yeah.
this terrace is 30 inches above
We'll be
that.
stepping-
So it's
yeah.
part of the landscaping.
Yeah, you're stepping onto the
Okay.
landscape.
What
on the
about
side.
this guy?
So this
like a
is
step down
yes.
to the slope.
This is on top of that lower level. So this is
Edge to the ground again,
10 feet.
10 feet. Okay,
So
so
it's
at
9
this
foot
part,
height inside.
that's 10 feet. This deck is how far above that terrace?
Are we 1 step or no
This,
steps
I
now?
think this may, we
we're
actually
at
made
level.
this level now.
We're
So this
level.
is all level?
All
Yeah.
level.
So you walk out over here, this is on grade,
Yep.
close to on grade, because it's only 30 inches above that. So in essence, you could call it a deck, but it's only 30 inches off the ground.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so do we have a motion? Okay,
Okay.
I see no one coming forward to motion, so I'm going to propose some wording and see if it's acceptable. The board would request that the applicant return with the following comments to the full board. That further study be made of the plate height of the master bedroom suite element in relationship to existing grade. That the applicant refine the site section in relationship to the west neighbor so that we can visually see the relationship in terms of elevations between the proposed master suite and the westerly neighbor.
Is it the easterly or westerly?
No, that's westerly. East is this way, I think.
No.
Oh, wait a minute. That's north. I'm sorry. I'm doing Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara direction.
That's easterly.
That's north. If this is
north.
so, it's north. Change all the east to north. Sorry. And that the board has reviewed the story poles and found that the second floor element identified as the master bedroom or slash gym office is within an acceptable range in terms of the view corridors from the variety of adjacent neighbors. That the remaining issues as previously discussed in terms of architectural style, architectural contents, the general configuration of landscaping, the landscape plan, the location of the driveway are reasonably acceptable. So the essence of the motion is to study lowering the bulk and size of the master bedroom wing. That's the motion.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion to the motion? Okay, hearing no further discussion of the motion, Cheryl, call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? One opposed? And one abstention. Okay. All right, we will see you back here. Thank you. All right. Let's go to, I think, our last item. 507 San Onofre. This is here for project design approval. And a question to Katie, is this project came to us before? Is this a new project, or did it have to go to the staff hearing officer? Is that what this is about? Do I need to read into the
Revised
record the
project
project
design
description?
approval.
You look to consent on a different design solution.
Yes, so it's a revised.
So do I need to read this into the record?
Yeah, you can read
Okay.
that.
All right, so I'm going to read into the record. This is a revised project description, proposal for additions and alterations to an existing 1,631 square foot, two-story, single-family residence with an attached 310 square foot, two-car garage. Proposed project includes demolishing the existing garage and constructing a new 445 square foot attached two-car garage with a 422 square foot second-story addition above. Other site improvements include a main floor addition of 70 square feet, 165 square foot deck, and a stair addition, and an increase in the chimney height. Proposed total of 2,568 square feet on a 9,780 square foot lot is 71% of the maximum allowable floor to lot area ratio. Project design approval and final approval is requested. If you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Paul Zink, and I'm the architect for the record, and I'm not requesting final approval, but if you give it to me, all the better.
Okay, that's what it says.
I'm talking to one of these people.
I'm so sorry. Photographs. This is at the corner of San Onofre and Clinton Terrace. This photograph is taken from this portion of the site looking at, it says it's a two-story house because it goes down into a hill. This is the existing, what looks like to be a one-story roof, but then there's a major retaining wall, not retaining wall, but just the site goes down at this location. We initially did an addition at this point, but because of construction constraints, the project grew to larger than our scope. So we decided to instead do a smaller addition on top of the existing garage and rebuild the garage to conform to the current standards. Moving along, this is the front of the house. As you can see, more of the house, the front door itself, and the one-story element. This is the house itself, front door. This is where the garage is, and you can tell where the garage door is in relationship to the street, that we're lower than the street. Then as you turn the corner towards Clinton Terrace and you're looking forward, there's an existing roof here of the garage, which you can see we're below, not quite below the street, but the house sinks down because the street raises up. And then as you're on Clinton Terrace looking back, you can see the house. This is the existing chimney that we're making reference to. Then once again, this existing fence is 100% permitted. That's currently located here. It was built without a building permit and had to get hiccuped and got all legalized by a previous architect. So what we are proposing is, in addition to this, at this portion of the house, the existing garage is not 20 by 20. This is the existing floor plan, the existing elevations of the house. So the addition of the house is where the garage is located. There's room for a stair going up. It's a tight stair, and I do realize that. Going up to the second floor, there's a closet, bathroom, master bedroom itself, the wall stack. There's a door to a landing going straight down. This is not considered a deck, but let me go back to the site plan real fast so I can show you what that setback is. I don't remember it. It's right here at this point. It would be about 11 feet is this line. Maybe I have to show my floor plan. It's 11 feet. Because the deck I'm referring to, this deck currently exists, and there's a staircase that goes down, so I'm extending this deck going up to a door at the master suite, which is right here coming on down. And then underneath the landing of the stairs, there's a laundry room and the garage. Elevation-wise, here's the front where the garage is. We're extending the chimney up 2 feet. Hip roofs match the existing hip roofs. This is the bathroom window, stair landing, traditional garage door. Facing where this deck is, this is the deck extension going up to the door and master bedroom windows, the raise of the chimney. And the other side elevation, this is that fence that you would see. This is the amount of the existing roof that you would see, and this is the part that you would see above the fence. So that is the presentation, and then some building sections. Building sections, we have 8-foot plate on the first floor and 7'10" on the garage, only because the stairs were so tight. So the garage is not quite 8 feet on the interior from the curb. So that is the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Katie, did we receive any public communication?
No, we did not, Mr. Chair.
Anyone in the audience wishing to address this project? Seeing no one come forward, Chair will close public comment and bring it back to the board for questions. Who has questions?
Everything, matching color schemes, like for like. And I do have a color board from the previous design when we were doing the 2-story element in the back of the building. So there is a color board in the file.
Okay. Other questions?
No, looks good.
You were kind of moving through it a little bit fast, so I want to just make sure I understand. This staircase on the site plan is where? No, this piece of the staircase.
Correct. This is the laundry room on the first floor, so it comes right across here.
So the stair is over the top of these
That
planters?
planter area,
So it's
correct.
out at that edge?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so the setback is where?
The setback is right here at 6
So
feet.
it's 6 feet, so this line is the setback. So that staircase is well within the property? Okay.
Correct.
All right, that's right.
It's just not the 15 feet when you consider it an outdoor a deck, but it's not an outdoor living space.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are there other questions?
Is this second story, the second story of this is going right on the corner of San Onofre and Clinton Terrace?
Correct.
So you're right on the corner?
20 feet back on each side.
On each side?
Mhm.
The setback, the required setback?
A little bit more, actually, at
So
21.
as you turn the corner, all you're going to look at is basically, except for the the steps and the deck coming off the door in the second story of what you're adding to, you're looking at two basically sheer walls.
Correct.
Sheer wall coming down in the garage door, and a two-story sheer wall that's coming down all the way on Clinton Terrace.
Correct. There is an existing window at this location here that limited how far we could move this addition forward, so we had to push the addition in order to have a 20-foot.
Elevations again. Because you showed us elevations of what it is now, and
So that's the elevations.
yeah, so we're looking at this from San Onofre.
Right.
And we're looking at
You're looking at that from
right there. And it's just 2 stories, just straight up 2 stories. Could I make a comment?
Well, I wanted to try to finish questions, and you come
Go
back
ahead.
and comment. Anybody else have
I just want to
questions before we
understand,
do?
this really looks like a really long connecting piece to the new second story and the stairway. It just looks a little bit excessively long. Is there any way that it could be broken up? or-
Okay.
Really, it was, the question is, this part already exists because there's a double door
And
here
just connecting
going to
the
the
two.
downstairs. And so now all we're doing is connecting, so from the master suite, you can get down to the, if we were to move the door on the other side, this staircase would go in front of the kitchen window.
Will there be landscaping?
All the existing landscaping is to remain, because really there's just this much of the garage, and then this area is just a DG in this zone.
Okay, I do have a question. I was over on Saturday or Friday, I forgot which day it was, and it appeared they were building a new porch out here. Is that part of this project, or was that permitted separately?
I am clueless if there's a new porch being added at that point.
They're building a new porch. You can physically see it because the lumber was there and the guy was working on it. I don't know who it was.
That was done without my knowledge.
Okay, well, you might want to check.
I'll add it to the permit.
You might want to add it to the permit. Okay. Okay, other comments? Or questions are done? Let's go to comments. Joe, you had comments.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of, additions above garages all over San Roque, west of San Roque, La Cumbra, and the ones that are just put right on the walls look like they're additions. This looks like an addition. This will not look like Samarkand. Samarkand is an area, we're supposed to be compatible with the area. Samarkand is an area of very expensive ranch houses that were built in the 40s and the 50s. And this is all of a sudden you're putting a square box on top of a square garage, and with maybe, two-story walls that are going to be right on the intersection. To me, doesn't fit our guidelines, because I just looked through here. It has a minus point that says, put some design in it. But how about setting the if you're back farther than the setback, let the master bedroom hang over the existing wall, so you have a break in the vertical sheer walls on those 2 places. You already know what I'm talking about?
If you don't mind, yes, I do. There's a little sketch that I doodled up earlier.
Okay, well, wait, before you even get to that, there's a problem with this elevation, okay? No, it's 1/4 inch. So right now, if I measure this, just scaling off the sheet, it's 18 feet to the bottom of the eave, roughly 18 foot 8 or 9 or something like that. And I go to the section.
The garage door is a lot lower than it should be.
Section, which is right here, I get 16 feet 8 inches. So either the section is right, or the elevation is wrong, or the elevation is right and the section is wrong, because you got 2 different. I'm like, yeah, this is 1/4 inch scale, so the scales are right. So that's the driveway, that's the bottom of the garage door. So I'm measuring 16 feet to the edge of the eave, roughly 8 inches. And over here on this elevation we've got 18 feet. So one of these is not right.
Well, this just drops down.
Yeah,
Well, I'm,
So,
2 feet, yeah.
so there's 2 feet that isn't,
we still got 2 sheer walls right on the corner of San Onofre and Clinton Terrace.
I agree with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just wanted to get the information
And
correct.
I think some design, I don't mind the second story right there, but I think some design ideas to that 2 sheer walls would make that look a lot nicer.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, but I'm going to reserve my comments till the end. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing it, wonder if there's some way to make the windows in the front elevation, I notice that's a bathroom window and that's a stair window, but they don't seem to balance very, and I think, yeah, something a little more interesting could occur. And also the stairway here, I mean, this is really a long stairway, sweeping stairway, and somehow it needs to be broken up, I think. So there has to be something applied to that addition, so as Joe says, it doesn't look like it's something plopped on the top of a garage. But those are my comments for now.
I think that, I'm not going to put some design in here, but I think the change of the balustrades or change of what you're using to put that whole thing in one line is throwing a lot of comments that don't need to be, because some of that is terrace and a stairway. If we had a stairway that looked like a stairway and then a terrace that looked like a terrace, it would look a lot better. I mean, we're standing back here looking at a sweeping line of balustrades that maybe don't like, and that's just our comments.
Denise?
Go ahead.
Is it really necessary to have that exterior staircase? You've got one on the inside.
We kicked around some different options, and we actually did have this closed in, and we had a different material, and this is wider, so we did play with an option of having this as a different type. It was designed or desired to have it all the same for similarity, but it does not have to be all the same, and it can be broken up.
Other comments? Yeah, this is very awkward, very awkward. And I appreciate, because having reviewed this house before, looking at the neighbors to this side, and you realize, when you go out there and walk that block and you turn this block, you realize where everybody sits. So I'm not sure why you have to have another opening out here to even have any of this. It doesn't make any, I mean, yeah, it would be great. I get to go down out that way. I can go inside the house, whatever. But, if I were even guessing that at some point in the future you wanted to make it an accessory dwelling unit where we didn't have to review it all, you put the staircase to the street. So if you're really going to do that, this thing's actually like that now. If you're really going to do that, there's nothing wrong with that kind of staircase coming that way. So you come down, you come back, you have a landing, and you go back down. That might look a little bit better than this big long thing hanging out there. I mean, that's a way to do it. You come out to a landing, you come down, you come to a landing, and you come back. If they really want a door out that end. So I think that's a way to solve that problem. I agree with Joe and others that we see this all over town where things weren't reviewed by this board and they really look awful. So I think you've got to give some thought here. I realize budget is an issue. Obviously you came back because they had some economic challenges with that addition. But I think you really got to come back and obviously get it redrawn so it looks right. And then I was checking. You said this was a bathroom window. What am I looking at?
Yeah,
that's a master bath. Yeah, I mean the pattern language of the windows is all over the place on this house. So
it's the existing condition.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. So somehow, I think that's a bit of a challenge because I hear what you're saying. These look awkward, but I understand they're into a bathroom, so you obviously don't want big picture windows. But somehow the placement of these windows is awkward. And then we turn the corner, you're looking at this thing in 3 dimensions, and then all of a sudden we get another style of window.
Yeah.
In ignoring these dotted lines, because they've gone away. You're now just looking at one straight wall. And you got another window style here. So I think the window fenestrations really need some study. And I think the staircase needs a whole different approach and a different study. And certainly lowering the eaves back down to where they need to be is appropriate. I realize you have an 8-foot plate height. I'm going to your sections. But we've also had folks where we've really had a challenge with second floors making them to look right, is to get the scale down even further, where we've requested the sill heights to go, or the plate heights to go down on the edge, the 7 feet or 7'6", and then you have a little bit of a vaulted ceiling inside. That's another way to kind of get the whole scale of this thing, particularly when it's on a corner, get that drop down. One of the challenges with this house is that when you turn the corner, back to the site plan, the road, this is not a flat road. This road's coming up, and then it turns, and then it's coming down again. So, you can't read it as just as a flat street. So, and certainly the scale thing is helped somewhat by this fence, but also I don't recall what the landscaping is in here. And again, some manipulation of a new tree or allowing a tree to go larger or whatever, that helps the whole scale thing also. So, being able to delineate that on the drawing is always helpful, because then you begin to see how that relates to the street, given the fact that you've got a limited budget and you can only deal with so many architectural elements because they all cost money. Other comments?
Still looks like an addition to me.
Well, and I agree. I don't disagree.
I
So
hear your comments.
It's not there yet, in my view. Yes.
Yes, I have a suggestion that might help the north elevation is some kind of trellis over the garage. Some kind of trellis structure, like a little 3-foot trellis over the garage, might be a nice thing to break up the two. That helps usually.
Okay. Other comments? All right, so the chair would then look for a motion to give some direction to the applicant.
I'll make a motion. We'd like to, are this comments only, or?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to have the architect return to the full board with the following comments. We'd like the architect to look at studying the north elevation, in particular how the windows and the garage relationship and balance work with the rest of the house. Looking at the south elevation, restudy the stairway to the addition as suggested by Mr. Sweeney, of perhaps changing the configuration of the exterior stair if needed. Study the different windows to see if there's an improved balance of the window sizes with the addition. Correct the height of the elevation to match the sections. And that's my motion.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
A second. We'll both second.
I'll take Lisa just because I saw her go first. Okay. Any further comments to the motion on the floor? Hearing none, the chair will call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So carried. Okay.
Continuance?
We'll see you
2
when we
weeks,
get back
yes.
to it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, is there any further business to the board today? Being no further business, the chair adjourns the meeting.